Hey guys, how you doing? Tekking101 here, and I'm really pumped for this video, guys. This is gonna be a fun one. This is gonna be a video where we discuss the various technology found in the One Piece world, because I was looking through it, and it's just a lot of crazy stuff that comes out of Oda's head. You know, how this world is set up, the various, like, weapons and communication equipment, and you see things in the background sometimes that's just like, that exists in the One Piece world? Like, really? How does that operate? So, I thought it'd be interesting to do a video about it, and, do you know what this means, though? Like, no, seriously, I want you to answer. Like, do you know what this means? What? Guys, I mean, I appreciate the effort. I mean, seriously, I do, but the answer to every question I ask is not just Robin's boobs. Only the answer to, like, 2/3 of the questions I ask are Robin's boobs. So I'll ask you again. Do you know what this means? Okay, I think we're just going further down a rabbit hole at this point. No, it means I finally get to live up to the name Tekking, as in Tech King. That's why I named it like that, because I was like 12 when I came up with it, and the 101 part comes from that show on Nickelodeon, Zoe 101. I finally get to access the truly awakened Tekking 101 powers! Transformation sequence, go! Your Tech King has arrived. Okay, yeah, not gonna wear that outfit throughout the entire video, mostly saving that get-up for Reverie. But yeah, technology in the One Piece world, it's pretty weird, right? Like, if you actually take the time of day to look at it, some of the stuff in One Piece is very ancient and archaic, and we don't get to see it that often in our modern society. Other stuff is, like, way beyond things that we have in our modern society. Just a few examples, just right out of the gate that I came up with. This is the stuff, like, just off the top of my head. First up, guns, weaponry, okay? Most of the time when we see the Marines, and remember the Marines is like the military force that is, you know, there to enforce the law of the world government all throughout the world. You think that the Marine soldiers would have, like, the best technology that the world government could possibly have to enforce their rule. Well, most of the time when we see Marine soldiers, they have either flintlock pistols or rifles as, like, their primary, like, sidearms or, like, main method of attack. You know, there's exceptions to this, but for the most time, whenever we see a Marine soldier, he's holding a freaking flintlock revolver. What's the problem with this? Well, then you get characters like Capone Beige that have fully automatic Tommy guns, or Karibo and his brother that have freaking Gatling guns at their disposal. So, a little bit of a discrepancy there on the level of firearms technology. You know, if they have the technology to make fully automatic weapons in the One Piece world, why are the Marines still using flintlocks? And I think the reason for that is at the beginning of the story, Oda wanted to make it very piratey, you know, so maybe he had like a general time frame in One Piece set around, you know, maybe the 15 or 1600s, something like that in our world, because the flintlock thing, you know, even in an early SBS, he was like drawing like a diagram of how a flintlock worked, like he wanted to show his audience like the very nature of how this weapon is fired and how pirates and the Marines use them. But then later on throughout the story, you know, over 20 years of serialization, Oda was like, well, you know, Beige's a mafia guy, so he's gotta have a Tommy gun, you know, even if it doesn't make sense, here you go. But it's a little bit of discrepancy there. You also see some weird stuff, of course, like you got Don Krieg decked out with all his freaking guns and his, like, diamond gauntlet spear guns, poisonous gas bombs, and the poison technology is very high. He's got a gas mask. Like, I'm pretty sure when, like, this type of, like, modern-looking gas mask was around, like, maybe in, like, World War I, World War II era, I'm pretty sure people weren't still shooting each other with flintlock pistols. You know what I mean? Something else is they lack conventional flying machines, such as airplanes, blimps, helicopters. You don't see anything like that in One Piece. Yes, there was Eneru's Ark, the Maxim, but that was like Sky Island tech, and that was run by his own Devil Fruit, and that was something very unique. What I'm saying when I say no conventional flying machines, we don't see the Marines having a freaking Air Force unit. We don't see dirigibles flying around Marineford or in Marijois, okay? We don't see helicopters. We don't even see really, like, hot air balloons, really. That's, like, not that kind of technology that doesn't exist yet. And yet, despite that they don't have those kind of flying machines that came into existence, like, 100 or so years ago in our world, they do have highly advanced robots that they're able to mass produce on a huge scale that can shoot straight-up laser beams. So what's going on there? Like, you know Vegapunk would be able to build a damn airplane. Like, you know he would be able to do that. At the bare minimum, he'd be able to come up with a blimp or something, you know? So, Vegapunk's gonna be brought up a lot in this video because he's the genius force behind the world government, and of course he has technology. Like, the things in his head are stated to not exist for 500 years. Like, that's how advanced Vegapunk is. And I can understand if, like, Oda used Vegapunk as the vehicle for producing these, like, oh, well, the reason they have fully automatic guns is because Vegapunk invented them. But that's not the reason. Like, Beige didn't get his gun from friggin' Vegapunk. Like, that's not how that goes down. Same thing with Karibo's Gatling gun. I think that's just an issue with something else. However, my idea on the whole flying machine thing is I think it is possible for them to create such a thing. I think the world government and the Gorosei know that. Hell, I think even, like, Vegapunk might have approached them once with, like, blueprints and been like, hey, check out this new plan. I call it a aeroplane. It'll be able to fly long distances. And maybe the government, like, took his blueprints and is like, alright, we'll get back to you. And then they showed it to the Gorosei, and maybe they came to a conclusion like, no, we can't have this kind of invention, because while it would give us and the government and the Marines a massive advantage on the battlefield, we can't risk the enemy getting a hold of these blueprints or getting like capturing one of these planes and turning it against us, because as we all know from One Piece and from watching my videos, geography is everything. Mostly, you know, oceans surrounding the One Piece world, island nations, as well as Marijois, located on the only continent, like thousands and thousands of meters on top of the Red Line. You can't easily access Marijois to overthrow the world government, is basically why they've been able to maintain power in the world for just so long. Flying machines throw a massive wrench into that whole plan. Like, that all goes out the window. So I think the reason that they don't exist is not because they can't, and not because Vegapunk would definitely be able to build one, like, no problem. But I think it's the reason, like, the Gorosei is like, no flying machines, no helicopteros, nothing like that, alright? We can't have any of that technology falling into the enemy's hand. They capture an airplane, they modify it, they could fly straight into freaking Marijois. We might be able to stop them, we might not. Depends on who it is, and depends on how they modify it or whatever. So, they just decide not to just not even screw with it. So that's the reason we don't have flying machines in One Piece. Another thing you might notice is that the main mode of transportation in One Piece are, of course, ships. Sailing ships, to be specific, you know, with a mast and, like, sails and things. And in order to move the ship, you need to move the sail. Now, of course, there are things like paddle ships. The Sunny actually now has a propulsion engine, like, underneath it. Actual engines. And the Navy battleships also have engines to allow them to get over the calm belt, you know, so, like, because there's no wind there, you know. So Vegapunk invented those things. However, most of the ships we see, even the Navy vessels that still have a propulsion to get through the calm belt, they still have sails. So that propulsion system might not be, like, on the level like we have nowadays, okay? So sailing ships are the norm. You know what makes that weird, though? Submarines exist. Why is that a big deal? Because the submarines, like we've seen in the One Piece story, the Shark Submerged 3 that was created by Frankie, the Law's, the Heart Pirate submarine, the Polar Tang, these are not, like, simple submersible devices that have been around because, you know, human beings have been trying to stay underwater for an indefinite period of time, for quite a long time. The early, you know, submarines were basically just like diving bells, you know, things that have a finite air supply and that were hand-powered usually. Those have been around for a few hundred years. However, the kind of technology like the Polar Tang is, that kind of submarine that's, like, machine-powered and has, like, a propulsion system and is not hand-powered and stuff and can dive, like, the Shark Submerged can handle a depth of, like, what was it, like, 7,000 meters or something like that? Like, really freaking deep. So, for that reason, those kind of submarines, they didn't come into play until the 20th century. So they still have sailing vessels, which stopped being utilized in, like, naval combat, like, a while ago. Like, I want to say in, like, the freaking 19th century. But their submarine technology is, like, 20th century, or maybe even possibly more advanced than that. You just don't know. And, I don't know. I'm not a Navy guy. My friend is. Maybe I should ask him. But I don't think the Navy uses, sailing ships anymore. I think we've kind of moved on from that stage in naval combat, you know what I mean? So I think for that reason you can explain it away by saying that that propulsion propulsion technology that Vegapunk is creating, like that paddle technology for the Navy vessels and everything, that's relatively new. That's like been developed in the last few years. Maybe the One Piece world is going to go through like a major industrial revolution because Vegapunk is around and he's part of the world government, and in a few years they're going to scrap the whole sailing ship idea and they're going to move on to other, other designs for their ships that might look more, similar to stuff we see nowadays. And we're just experiencing like that curve right now. Like we're just getting into that era. So maybe not like we're going to see that in the course of the story, but in, in the world building element, maybe that's what's going on right now. Right, so that's it for like transportation kind of technology. Okay. I don't know. So what about more like communication kind of technology? Now, obviously, they don't have smartphones and the internet in the One Piece world, like pirate Twitter. But they do have a way to communicate with each other long distances, and that is, of course, the Den Mushi network. Now, the Den Mushi are not a product of technology. They are living creatures. They are animals. They are snails that are able to communicate telepathically. So like a psychic Den Mushi network. And the humans basically just exploited that by adding extra like little gadgets and doodads on top of them. So they do have the technology to make like speaker grills and things like that, and receivers and like rotary phone attachments, even a fax machine at one point. So they do have that level of technology. In fact, if the Den Mushi system did not exist, they might have just invented cell phones. But since the Den Mushi network does exist, they figure we can just take advantage of that and communicate through that means. It has everything that we need. So view the Den Mushis as basically like the cell phones of One Piece, because they are. It's also a clever way for Oda to display like a unique way of communication. Like no one would have ever thought of that. Like, oh yeah, the way that people communicate in the One Piece world, they talk to snails. You sure? That sounds like something you just came up with off the cuff. No, they talk to snails. I'll make it make sense. Don't worry, I'm Oda. Don't worry about it. So that's just the way it goes. And also, it's cool to see the Den Mushi having, like, expressions of happiness or whatever. And I'm planning on doing a video just all about the Den Mushi, so don't worry about that. At some point, that's going to be discussed there. But yeah, so not having the internet or television or anything... but they kind of do with screens, with monitors, because the monitor room in Impel Down had conventional screens, like, like glass screens, like right there, that's what they are. There's a monitor room, there's control panels, there are monitors there. Now, the way they hook this up is a little different. They can connect these systems to Den Mushi. They have visual Den Mushi that are able to, like, scan things like a camera, and you can watch what they're watching. They also have ones that can, like, stream events, like a projector type visual Den Mushi that will actually like project something out of its eyes onto a blank surface like a projector does in our world, However, they clearly do have like TV monitors and things like that, and even more so in Dressrosa, when out of nowhere Doflamingo like just has this broadcasted message all over Dressrosa on like 4K HD plasma screens. Like there's one panel here where he projects himself over all of Dressrosa, and you could say that that is the work of a visual Den Mushi that is relaying that giant image. But then you clearly see actual televisions like scattered all over Dressrosa, like they're there. You might just say maybe that's just the screen they project on. Okay, fine, but Impel Down monitor room, the world government definitely has they're definitely making, monitors and things like that. So that does exist in the One Piece world. Also, Oda mentioned this in the last SBS, but the One Piece mailing system is apparently lagging years and years behind, because everyone can communicate over Den Mushi if you have one of those, and, One Piece is mostly waters, so communicating through letter or sending things is kind of difficult. It's not easy to do that, but there's various mail services like Small Bird Delivery and Albatross delivery services, and of course the News Coup that deliver the newspapers. Newspapers are still very prevalent in One Piece. They haven't died out yet. But who knows? Maybe if this trend continues, the Den Mushi can be hooked up and they'll have like an internet through the Den Mushi. Oh my god, those poor snails. They'd have to watch people jerk off to porn every single day. And do you see how hot the women are in the One Piece world? That Pornhub in One Piece would be completely different from the Pornhub in our world, okay? Like, everyone would stop with what they were doing. All wars would cease if that was the case. Speaking of sexiness, let's talk about a very interesting part of the technology in One Piece. Something that I think I want to definitely look into. The sheer level of intellect and planning, and like scientists had to struggle. Vegapunk even really had a hard time cracking this. The massive support structures that went into the bras that the women wear in the One Piece world. Like, you can't tell me, like, you get that kind of support, you know, with just an ordinary bra. There's some, like, next-level technology, like cyborg robot-level shit going on here, okay? Because other than that, you're just gonna tell me that boobs work differently in anime, and I refuse to admit that, kind sir. That's just talking nonsense. Oh, and something else to bring up, I didn't even think of this till just now, the medical technology that exists in the One Piece world. So yeah, they have hospitals, they have, like, antibiotics, they have syringes, they have medicines that are, like, that we have today in our world, like penicillin and stuff. You know, when Kureha and Chopper were treating Nami, they were discussing what she had. You know, she was bitten by a Kestia, this tick, but she was talking about what it does to you. It causes a severe, you know, infection, and there's a fever, and there's carditis, I don't even know what that is, and arthritis, I know what that is. So those kind of things are well known in the One Piece world. Now they are prone to some, like, hysteria whenever Corazon presented Law to those hospitals and he was like, he's got amber lead disease. The doctors freaked out. They'd, like, immediately, like, get him out of here, he's gonna kill us all. You know, that's not how doctors are supposed to act. Like, even if you show up to a hospital with a severe disease, like if you got the flesh-eating virus or some horribly infectious thing like salmonella, some really infectious disease, the hospital's just not going to kick you out like, oh god, get it away, kill it! No, they're gonna quarantine you. They might have to call, like, the CDC or some shit, but they'll treat you to the best of their abilities. So that kind of lags. The bedside manner kind of lags a little bit behind in the One Piece world, but they have that technology. Law is a surgeon. Well, he's the surgeon of death, but no, don't let that title fool you. He's a surgeon, and in the anime it's fleshed out, like, he's even got, like, a basic operating room setup, you know, the masks and the things and all the different equipment that, you know, surgeons use in the modern day. So, yeah, the medical technology is also very, very far advanced in the One Piece world. What else to discuss? Well, they have electricity. They do. There's a refrigerator on the Sunny. They have light bulbs. They're around. Also, they have things like, remember the Bridge of Hesitation at Eni's Lobby? The Gates of Justice in general? They have, like, levers, mechanized things that allow you to, like, you know, control these giant gears, like, you know, pull the bridge back, open these giant gates of justice. Electricity definitely exists. If electricity exists, there's gotta be, like, underwater cables, you know, from, you know, the control room to the Gates of Justice to, you know, control it that way. So yeah, electricity is definitely a thing. It's just not as prevalent. Also, you have to keep in mind, each island might have its own level of technology. You know, I think a perfect example is like, look at Little Garden. Little Garden is stuck in the freaking prehistoric age. Meanwhile, Baltimore, future island that Frankie got sent to, birthplace of Vegapunk, super advanced technology. Probably mostly because of Vegapunk. But, you know, Punk Hazard. Punk Hazard has the giant government facilities with all the different research equipment. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what island you're on. Other islands like Alabasta seem to be more, you know, archaic. I mean, you're stuck in, like, the Middle Ages kind of deal. Other islands like Water 7 are clearly more advanced. I'm not even gonna get into the whole issue with the One Piece movies, like that turtle car we saw in Film Gold. I think that's all. I think they just, like, let's have the Straw Hats ride around in a really fancy car on a giant ship that's also a casino. By the way, we have casinos, like, with slot machines and electricity and shit like that. So I'm gonna ignore the movies for the most part, but I had to bring them up. Okay, let's get into some of the more weird technology that exists only in the One Piece world, aside from the Den Den Mushi. So, ship coding. Now, this is something that kind of only exists around the Sabaody Archipelago and Fishman Island. The Yukimura mangrove trees, might have been mispronouncing that, the Yakimara, whatever, like the manly pumpin' mangrove trees, whatever they're called, they secrete a special resin, and when the air is breathed into the tree throughout, it causes bubbles to appear, and these bubbles can be used for a bunch of different things on the Sabaody Archipelago. They can be used as, like, bicycles, and people use them to carry their stuff around. Very handy to have. Also, if you're an artisan in this craft, like Rayleigh was, you can coat entire ships the size of galleons with this resin, and whenever something is coated with this resin, it loses all of its buoyancy, and you're allowed to, like, you know, dive under the ocean, and then go, that's how you get to Fishman Island. However, if you get a certain perimeter away from Sabaody, the bubbles do not function. So basically, you just gotta be underwater, or you gotta be near those mangrove trees, because that creates a very special climate for those bubbles to exist. Not too hard to understand, really. Just whatever's coated with the bubbles, you know, it loses its buoyancy, and the bubbles themselves, they float, and that's all there is to there. Now, as for the Sky Island tech, because there's so much interesting stuff with that, the dials, you know, Eneru's arc, you know, all the weapons that the Shandians had, the flash guns, like, the weapons you can make out of dials, like, there's so many interesting things with the Sky Island technology. I kind of want to make that a separate video. I want to have a separate video on, like, discussing all the various dials, all the various dial weapons, and I thought about including it in this one, but I think it would just be better if I made that a separate thing. So look forward to that, but of course I have to mention all the crazy Sky Island tech, as well as with the technology on Weatheria. I gotta talk about that, but I'll get to that when I make the separate thing about Sky Island. Okay, so now let's get back into weapons a little bit. Of course, we already mentioned the flintlocks and the automatic weapons that Beige and Karibo have. Krieg was decked out. Geen even used like an equivalent of like a double-barrel shotgun at one point. The Straw Hats have used guns at certain points. Most of the time you see these things, they're usually designed like flintlocks. That's the key, though. Designed like flintlocks. They look like flintlocks, but they might, you know, have a completely different system of like how they operate and things like that. So sometimes we've seen them, you know, they don't operate like actual flintlocks, like they can fire more rapidly. Let's look at some other stuff, though. What other kind of weapons do you have in One Piece? Well, of course, you have the ancient weapons. Did a video about that. We don't know much about them, but we know that Pluton is a battleship that's capable of obliterating an entire island in one shot, so you gotta have some, like, nuclear level, you know, armaments on that thing to blow an entire island up. That's pretty heavy shit right there. Something else that we have interesting is, Baby 5, okay? Baby 5 is interesting in this concept, okay? The Buki no Mi she's got, the arms fruit. I did a video about that, but let me just kind of expand on this a little bit. Allow me to present to you something I like to call the Baby 5 paradox, alright? So, arms fruit allows her to transform into weapons. Makes sense. Now, of course, you got simple things like knives and guns. Those are fine. Like, you can turn your arm into a sickle. That's basic metallurgy, you know, not that complicated. Flintlock, okay, turn your hand or a finger into a flintlock. Okay, we've seen those in the One Piece world. Flamethrower. Alright, they have lighters, like, they have cigarettes. Sanji has a lighter, you know, there's fuel in the lighter. Here's it makes this, like, the flint makes a spark, and then you got a lighter, so the concept of making a flamethrower is probably not too far off in the One Piece world. They probably have those. What else can she turn into? Oh, you know, nothing that major. Just a freaking missile! Like, a straight-up missile, like surface to air. Well, I guess air to surface in that situation when she used it against the Frankie Shogun. But, you know, a missile in the One Piece world. Here's where the paradox comes into play, okay? Scenario number 1. Baby 5 can transform into any weapon, even if it doesn't exist in the One Piece world. The problem with scenario 1 is that if she can transform into any weapon that doesn't even exist, so missiles don't actually exist in the One Piece world, that would have made things a little bit more, you know, easy, I think, for the government if they just had missile silos ready to go. If she could transform into any weapon, you know, why doesn't she use the Pacifista's laser? We haven't seen her use anything like that, which is something I think would be massively useful for her to use. Also, what is the extent of this? If she could transform into a missile, then maybe she could, like, transform right into, like, a nuke. Nuclear girl, you know, I don't know what to tell you, but that's scenario 1. That's kind of the problem with that. Scenario 2 is that she can turn into any weapon that currently exists in the One Piece world. So as long as it currently exists, she can transform into it. Once again, that's a problem because then missiles would exist in the One Piece world, okay? And, you know, they would definitely have that technology. And scenario 3 is she can just transform into any weapon that she actually physically comes in contact with. So when she touches a gun, it's a weapon, she can transform into a gun. Alright, and the problem with scenario 3 is that would mean that, like, she had to touch a missile and the Doflamingo family would have access to a missile. That would explain why she couldn't use the Pacifista laser. Maybe she never came in contact with Pacifista, but that would mean the Doflamingo family would have access to a freaking missile. And I don't think, you know, I think at some point during Dressrosa, Doflamingo would be up against a wall. He'd be like, alright, deploy the missiles. Freaking missile silos appear out of Dressrosa. Ah, crap! It's over, man! It's over! So, there you go. I really want to know, because that really does bug me. You know, the sickles, the guns, the flamethrower, all that stuff's fine. But a straight-up missile, even the Gao cannon that Frankie developed for the Sunny and for the Frankie Shogun, you know, that at least it kind of makes sense, because all it is really is just a tremendous amount of compressed air that he's releasing. And in the anime, it looks like a straight-up, like, laser death beam, but that's all it is. That's all the Kude burst is, that's all the Gao cannon is, that's all, like, the Frankie Shogun, that's all it is just a compressed air shot out at incredibly fast speed, okay? And he's using cola to power it, and that's how he's, like, got a giant air compressor, okay? That kind of makes sense there. Frankie, of course, figured out how to use the radical beam, the lasers. He learned that from Vegapunk's lab, so we all talked about this. But Baby 5 and that missile, man, that messes me up. You know, if I'm ever going to write a letter to Oda for the SBS, that's what I'm asking him. I just got that now. In fact, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it right now. Let's write Oda a freaking letter. I have the address. Somebody sent me an address to send it to Viz Media in San Francisco, like their American offices. And it's like, oh yeah, they sent me and they said, hey, if you want to send Oda a letter, send it to this address and we'll make sure he gets it. That's what somebody told me, so that's what I'm going. All right, here we go. I'm using my official One Piece stationery for this. Okay, here we go. Greetings from America. I guess not Oda-sensei, that seems kind of weeby. Mr. Oda, I have a question pertaining to the lovely Miss Baby 5. An actual missile! It terrifies me to think that such a weapon could exist, so that got me thinking, can she transform into any weapon? What about the Pacifista's laser? Thank you for taking the time to read my letter. Signed, Tekking101. P.S. As both a man and a pervert, I just need to know, can she turn her boobs into guns? I need to know! Exclamation point, exclamation point. I think 2 exclamation points are there are good. I don't want to stretch it for 3, you know what I mean? Alright, so, yeah, there's the letter right there. So, let's mail this bitch. Duchess, you want to go for a ride in the car? Good girl, good girl. And there you go. Okay, so that's that. If that actually appears in the next SBS, or one of the next SBS's, I get mad street cred in the One Piece community for days from that. Roger, Joy Boy, King for Never, I got a letter published in freaking SBS. Oda himself actually acknowledges my existence. Bam! Slam dunk all y'all. Okay, alright, okay. Back at it. What were we talking about? I went on a massive tangent just now. I know there was another part of this I wanted to discuss. Alright, I have my notes. Alright, we did the coding, we did the sailing ships, the dials, that's gonna be a separate video. Electricity, Missile Girl. I think I actually might have addressed every major point I wanted to mention. Now, of course, there's always like a weird part of technology that you're gonna see every now and then in the One Piece world. Depends on your island. Like, just some weird stuff they had in Totland because of Big Mom's homie abilities. He had some weird stuff going on there and stuff, like her ship being able to speak and things like that. Of course, Devil Fruit related abilities, they don't really count as technology. They might facilitate like technology, like Kizaru's Pika Pika no Mi, his Light Fruit inspired Vegapunk to figure out a way to create a laser. Now, whether or not he was able to like incorporate Kizaru's laser into the Pacifistas, or Vegapunk just figured out a way to replicate the laser watching Kizaru do it, that's another debate there. But just in terms of like just straight up technology that we've seen, I think I covered it. So what's your favorite piece of technology in the One Piece world? What are some weird stuff you've noticed? Because it's such it's such a long story. You could probably find something like in the background, like, oh, here in chapter 326 in the background, there's a character using what looks like a smartphone. I'd be like, really? I didn't see that. Who knows? But, yeah, what do you guys think about the technology? Let me know. Den Den Mushi video as well as a dial video will be coming out to cover that kind of aspect of technology in the One Piece world. So yeah, that was it. Thanks for watching, everybody, and let's all hope that my letter gets received by Oda. I hope he reads it. Have a good one, everybody. Tekking signing out.